Do you remember your first time? Were you excited? Maybe a little scared? Curious, what's it going to be like? On this episode of RDH Coast to Coast, we take a trip down memory lane, thinking back to when we were just beginning our professional career. After all, we all had our first time, and thank goodness as time goes by, we can look back and cherish that moment of being awkward and a newly licensed hygienist. So kick back, relax, and join Tina and Kim on this Power Chat episode. Hey Kim, how are you today?
Good, Tina. How are you? Good to be back.
It is good to be back. This is our second go around of recording our podcast, and I think it's going pretty good, don't you think?
I do too. It's very natural, which is the best, I think,
Yeah.
for everything.
Yes, and we've learned some things along the way, like how to record this a little bit more appropriately so that we're not bouncing video back and forth. It is amazing when you do something for the first time, the things that you learn.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Which kind of makes me think, Kim, right? Like speaking of like doing things for the first time, remember your very first step into like the dental hygiene, being a paid professional with that? Like I remember my very first day of being a paid hygienist. Like legit never had done anything outside of school, right? And now I'm like, oh my gosh, they want to pay me to do this?
Now, Tina, I have to ask, did you have dental experience before you went to hygiene school?
No,
Okay,
I
neither did
didn't
I.
at all. I didn't at
Okay,
all. It
neither did
was the only experience I had was shadowing at the
I.
dental office that I
Same.
went to, like shadowing my hygienist. That was the only experience that I had. So no, I was very green, very green.
Same.
Yeah.
Same.
Yeah. So do you remember your first day of or your first few days of being a hygienist?
I sure do. I remember I was there so early because I didn't want to be late. I was waiting in the parking lot before anybody showed up, including the doctor, and he would be the first one to get there. And then I think he would kind of be annoyed that here I am in the parking lot walking in with him at first thing in the morning as to get right in the door and start going through my charts, as all the other team members literally trickled in 2 minutes before their first patient. And that boggles my mind. Like, how are you ready? How do you know what you're doing? How do their medical histories? How are you prepared? Right. So that was a very intense situation for me. It was also, I was filling in for a maternity leave. I knew I wasn't going to be in this office long term. But I really, that first day I was like, okay, where's my feedback? Is the doctor going to tell me how I'm doing? You're so used to your instructor saying,
Are you
okay,
going to
go
tell me where I missed my
yeah, where
deposit?
did I miss? Right. So, I used to think, oh my God, I'm leaving subgingival calculus. He's going to have this patient back to do restorative, and he's going to realize that I'm not getting all this calculus off because I'm in such a panic, which obviously wasn't the case, but that's what was going through my mind at the time. So I remember one day too, a few weeks in, I walked in his office and I was like, how am I doing? And he looked up from whatever he was doing and he's like, fine. It's like, okay, fine. Like, is it fine? You're doing great out of school. Or is it fine? I wish I didn't bring a new grad into the office, right?
Is this all the girls? I'm fine.
Right, right. So it was a very intense real world experience for me that I really struggled. I was a very strong student in school, straight A's, strong in the clinic setting. But I really began doubting myself when I hit the working world.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, that and we've talked about that, like, go back to imposter syndrome when we talk about that, right? Where you're like going through, yes, for sure. That's a big thing for sure.
Yeah.
So uh so my first day, I was fortunate enough that I actually had a job waiting for me when I got out of school. The doctor that was my dentist growing up, he said, if I don't have a job for you, I'll help you find one. So in my mind, I'm like, I have a job waiting for me because I knew, right? And one of his colleagues was needing a hygienist, but he didn't need anybody for 2 weeks. So I had my license, and then it was like 2 weeks before he needed me. So I went ahead and I temped, and the first office that I walked into was an office that I was temping at. I had no idea what I was doing. I walked in and I was like, okay, so this is a chair that I've never used before. I don't know how to turn it on. Like, how do I make the chair go up and down? How to make the patient lay back? All those things. But what was one of those moments where I was like, I realized I was like, they're never going to ask me to come back was when I went to take x-rays on the patient. And, I graduated back in 2001. And the school that I went to, we used for our x-rays these lead collimators. So these big, heavy metal rings that you only had like a tiny little window to work through. And I just got very used to working with those. And they were horrible for our patients. But, you got to have a size 2 film for one thing, or a size 1 film for your anterior PAs. Well, I was in this office and I had to take a anterior PA. I just had to take one anterior PA, and all they had was this weird plastic XCP ring that I was like, I think I saw these before, and a size 2 film. And here I am trying to take a canine lateral PA with the size 2 film, and I don't know how to get it inside his mouth to make it fit. And I'm like sweating.
I was going to say, then the sweat starts to pour.
Yes. And the doctor walks by, and I looked at him. I was like, I can't get this film in there. And the look on his face was like, oh my gosh, like such a basic skill. And it was such a basic skill. So he came in, he placed it, we took the image, and the rest of the day went on. And I walked out, and they went ahead and handed me my check. That was how it worked back then, is they handed me a check, and it was like for $200, which I was like, woohoo, we're going to Red Robin for dinner tonight. We're splurging, right? Because I lived off of top ramen and Kraft mac and cheese. And the office was like, never send her back here again. And it was like, it was kind of traumatic. And then thankfully, I got my feet under me. But oh yeah, those first few days were just very, very interesting. And it was definitely, it was kind of a horror show.
Yeah. And I think that's what's to be, so many hygienists come out of school and they want, and I think we maybe touched on this too, like you want to be the best, right? So you hold yourself to this high standard that then you get flustered so easily on your first day. It's like, take that first day as it is. It's going to be not what you expect, unless you're going, especially in a temping situation, right? Because they probably didn't even know that you were out of school. They weren't prepared to, assist you throughout the day. But as you are getting a new job, ask for that extra time with the patient. I always say that's so important as you're, one, trying to figure out how to work in an office, two, how to work with a team. But if they can give you an extra 20 minutes, sometimes 30 minutes at the end of the appointment. So one, if you're running late, two, if you're trying to figure out how to, it takes you time to figure out how, to work in the Steri Center and things like that. And then write up your notes. So if you have that extra time, you're not feeling the pressure of the clock either as you're trying to make it through that first day, which is, it's always hard.
And I think as a seasoned professional, I think you still feel that if you go into a new office or a new situation, it's that pressure of the unknown, and just kind of going back and reminding yourselves of when you couldn't figure out how to put the XCP in a patient's mouth, or when you're like, how does this chair move? That's just part of being in a new situation. And I think that as a seasoned hygienist, when we find ourselves in those situations, like I wonder sometimes if we're a little harder on ourselves. I know I'm harder on myself, where I'm like, okay, Tina, you've only been doing this for over 20 years. You should know how to make this chair move.
But that, I always try to tell myself if I'm temping and I go in an office to remind myself, okay, practice with the chair before the patient sits in it, because I can't tell you how many times the patient sits in the chair and I can't figure out. I'm like, oh, you're going for a ride today. Like, I'm new here. Let's just figure out the chair. So,
Yeah.
they're up and down. They're all over the place. So I just want to
Right. Right. Oh gosh. Oh, memory lane, memory lane.
It is. And to look back and see how far you've come, we know that it gets better.
Yeah, it really does. And I think that that's sometimes some of the fun things about when you're a seasoned hygienist and you can sit around the table with other seasoned hygienists, arthritic hygienists maybe, and talk about, remember when you were so young and naive and you didn't know these things, and just to laugh about them now. So, Kim, thanks for
Because you
laughing with me.
also, when you're younger too, or when you're fresh out, you take everything to heart. If the patient walks up to the front and they're like, I don't want to see that hygienist again. Like, if someone was to say that now for me, it's like, okay, we didn't jive. That's fine. I don't, plenty of other patients. But as a new hygienist, when somebody would say that, I'd be like, you get in the car and you go over in your mind, what did I do wrong? What did I say? What was it about that interaction that turned that patient off? Real quick, a funny story. I was just in Nashville for RDH Under One Roof, and my Uber driver driving me back to the airport was telling me about an experience he had in the dental chair where he had a hygienist and she took his blood pressure. His blood pressure was so high that he was also a larger individual. So he asked to get a larger cuff, took the cuff, his blood pressure was still high. And he said to the hygienist, it's always like that. And I said, I know, but she's doing her job, and it's our responsibility to monitor that for you, because so many people don't know what their blood pressure is. And you should be thankful that she did that and that she did go and get the doctor to review that information with you. And he said, yeah, well, after, I called the office and said, I don't want to be put with that hygienist again. And I was like, wow. And I, didn't go too much into it with him, but I said, just keep in mind that your health is always at the utmost importance to any healthcare individual that you see, regardless if you think they're just going in to take a look in your mouth. Like, it's still so important, and don't be so hard on her.
Way to advocate for your stranger or sister hygienist or Mr. Hygienist right there. Yes.
Right.
Wow. Gosh. Okay, Kim. So my key takeaways today would be one, it's okay to be new. It's definitely okay to be new. And even if you're brand spanking green, or if you're a little seasoned, like, you're gonna have new experiences, and to think of them as learning fun moments that you can later look back and laugh on. What about for you, Kim?
Same. I go in with low expectations so that the day is only going to exceed those expectations that you set for yourself. And then just go over and say, take everything as a learning experience. This went well. This didn't go well. This is going to improve. This is not. And then leave it at the door when you walk out.
Wonderful. All right, Kim, thanks for another great episode.
Yes.
Thank you to our sponsor, Dental Post, the nation's largest dental job board. Be sure to check them out for different types of employment resources. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe to this podcast. And make sure you follow Tina and Kim on all the different social medias to learn other tips and tricks related to dentistry. Until next time, have a great day.